Hello, this is Matt O'Leary, and this is New Music Monthly, where I cover my favorite albums and most anticipated releases of the last month, mainly in the worlds of indie alternative and prog. And usually that means about 7 to 10, give or take, mini, beautiful, juicy little album reviews. Everything from Caroline Polachek in the world of pop to some obscure ECM jazz or something like that. You know, if it's melodic, it's in here. And as usual, I give my deep cut guarantee on this video. You will discover something new that, will make you say, or your money back. The secret is you're only giving me your time, not your money. First up on the docket today is the fifth album by Scottish singer-songwriter Steve Mason called Brothers and Sisters. I'm on my way to the river. The most succinct genre label for this is probably like roots rock meets world music. It's got a very organic folkiness about it that really matches the themes that are very humanitarian, very globalist. Steve's very hushed but gravelly and well-traveled voice just works perfectly with this rugged renegade feeling in the music. The lyrics have that perfectly vague quality where they could serve as an anthem for any agenda or worldview you ascribe to. And the music also gets you ready to join the cause with its, repetitive, very anthemic refrains with these cross-cultural sounds that are intentionally weaved and integrated together. Like the songs No More or Brixton Fish Fry, which featured the amazing voice of Pakistani singer Javed Bashir. Both are very groove-based anthems that sound equally Western and Eastern. Like I'm struggling to point to the exact influences of these songs, and that's probably the point. This feels like just universally catchy music. It uses heavy bass and repetition to just make you feel like singing along. The song The People Say is another highlight for me. It sounds very Rolling Stones. It's in C major, and then you get this third interval that jumps up to the fourth and then back and forth, and that sound is just very hopeful. Then you get this surprising shift downward. We go from C and the chorus goes down a whole step to A sharp, and it's just a beautiful chord change, just a really arresting moment. Traveling Hard is probably my favorite track, though. It's got every section feeling so distinct, and the verses have this eerie Roger Waters sort of vocal style going on. And then there's the hand-clapping, brass-filled refrain of "No one said it was gonna be easy." If I saw this album described on paper, I probably wouldn't be interested. It's got kind of a roots rock thing and this globalist attitude and kind of an adult contemporary vibe to it. It sounds like music that would end up on NPR's, Obama's favorite songs playlist at the end of the year. Yet I can't deny this record. It's just one I keep coming back to again and again. And second on my list today is some instrumental prog with the drummer of the band Anglagard and members of the band Metaphor. Isobar with Isobar III. I think it's Isobar, maybe Isobar. Anyway, these dudes mix all the classic elements of symphonic prog with jazz fusion. It's extremely well recorded, it's well produced, it's well performed. Shadow Green starts like Rush's Closer to the Heart with that xylophone line, and then develops with this Genesis-like pastoral guitar and mellotron. And like many albums of this kind, it's not one that really can be teased out with only one or two listens. Like you gotta put some time in, and there are a lot of melodies that remind me of Andy Latimer's guitar playing with Camel, but the melodies aren't quite as immediate, not quite as sticky on first listen as that. That's probably due to the heavy jazz fusion sound. I hear a guitarist like Jeff Parker on the song Object, with its melodies that kind of weave and meander around without much repetition. My major critique of the album is that some of the performances feel very rigid. They feel almost like quantized, like exactly on tempo and with the same, velocity or how hard something is struck each time. And, albums of the 70s, especially some of the classic prog stuff, had a lot of human air and varying tempos that just gave them a lot of energy. But this is still the perfect album for anyone who likes the more instrumental, the more jazzy side of bands like Genesis and King Crimson and Camel especially. Next up is probably my find of the month. This one I've been extremely excited to share. I recently talked about the album on a Prog panel show with Notes Reviews and some other guys. And it's just a great band from Portugal, very young, very talented. And, all the indie prog nerds out there, stay tuned. Dispirited Spirits with the Redshift Blues. This is, like I said, a Portuguese band led by a very young 19-year-old Indigo Dias, who's just a incredible talent on guitar and vocally especially. Called this alternative rock, art rock, post-hardcore, emo. It's got all that in it. It's also got, jazz and post-rock and space rock. It's got a space-themed sort of thing going on, and it sounds a little bit like the Mars Volta. It sounds a lot like early Deer Hunter moments, at least. Rarely has anything to do with emo done a space-themed album. You'll hear some of those interesting sonic and thematic themes and mixtures on a song like Former Living Thing, which starts with a jazz trio sort of sound and then moves into this atmospheric post-rock. Before the climax comes with this passionate post-hardcore sound, hence the early Deer Hunter thing. Methanol Fire is an especially proggy track with this very atonal intro that, kind of noodles around. And I think if you listen to that one and Former Living Thing and Bring Down the Sky, those three tracks give you a good representation of what they do best. They really just have a ton going on this 41-minute, 7-track album. There's so many ideas. It's overflowing with influences and ideas, most of which feel a little bit young, a little bit immature, a little bit underdeveloped, like the fruit, we haven't quite got to harvest yet. It's a little melodramatic vocally at times. There are some plodding moments, some melodies that don't seem to go anywhere, some really slow passages that, like I said, just feel underdeveloped. But this has so many incredible moments as well, just really blissful climaxes and builds that, it's just one where I see a great album coming in 2-3 years. I recently made an Albums That Made Me video about Deer Hunter's Act 4, and we're going to stay on that train with the last album that, sounded a lot like them in some ways, but this next one is the closest thing to Casey Crescenzo's sound that I've ever heard. Keepenak Root is the project of Reese Ortenberg, who's a mega Deer Hunter fan who's apparently went to the summer camps they hold every year. And this is a near hour-long alternative prog epic with tons of flashy musicianship and heartfelt writing. The song Gray shows the band's dynamic range and knack for melody. It's probably their most sing-along chorus. And the way those backing vocals join that cascading outro is just really satisfying. Repose is another highlight for me. Just really great production on these songs for what I imagine is a pretty low budget. The bass, the drums, each have their own space and presence in the mix. There's tons of great stuff on here, but I think in the end it just leans a little bit too much into its influences. They mention Leprous, they mention Haken and some of their materials, and I definitely hear those pretty strongly throughout. But most distractingly is that Deer Hunter sound. It's totally cool that they're so influenced, but there are moments here that sound way too similar, like just on the nose. I like that groove on Where It All Went Wrong, which just sounds so much like The Flame Is Gone from Act 5. Or the beginning of Sanctuary, which is City Escape? I mean, technically, no. They're not exactly the same, but what they achieve emotionally is very, very similar. Just like Dispirited Spirits, my critiques here are meant to be constructive and encouraging. They're not meant to discourage or tear down. I think these are incredibly talented groups and people, And for all of our sakes, I hope they continue to blossom and just turn into the next generation of this kind of alt-prog sound. If you like this stuff, then I think Reese has another album called Decima from a while back. I think it's under his own name, not sure, Reese Ortenberg. But haven't checked it out. It's definitely on the honey-do list that I wrote myself. Next up is a Dutch dude with a huge billowing head of hair. I'm convinced this guy is one of the best pop artists of our time, and it is, of course, Yes. Benny Sings is Tim Van Berkestein, who's collaborated with the likes of Rex Orange County and Tom Misch and Mac DeMarco. He plays bass, he plays keys, he plays guitar, he sings. His voice is very understated, but just perfect. Just so good for this music. And did I mention the guy writes hooks? I became a fan on City Pop back in 2019 and a super fan on Music in 2021. Young Hearts is the 10th album and continues this funky, saccharine indie pop sound that he's known for. Benny's music is deceptively simple. I think it's because it's so sugary sweet, and there are moments like this. I wanna be in pajamas. I like the way my But in a similar way to Wolfpack's best stuff, I think it's super corny, but at the same time, very musically sophisticated and jazzy. I'm addicted to that groove on The Only One. It's just got this Strokes-like efficiency to it with that little hand drum just bopping in the background. Young Hearts really isn't out of the ordinary for him, and unlike City Pop or Music, I don't think the writing is amazing throughout, but is it delectable? Is it tasty? Yeah. And at an efficient 26 minutes, it's not trying to be something it's not. It's more music, man. A grisly and grotesque but equally smooth and easy prog album slots in next. This is a band I didn't discover until this album. RPWL is a German progressive rock band that started in the late 90s as a Pink Floyd cover band, believe it or not, and then shifted into original albums in the 2000s. Crime Scene is their 8th studio album. And the Pink Floydisms are very obvious here. There are a lot of slow tempos and these dreamy chord voicings like Gilmour. But I also get distinctively Porcupine Tree kind of vibes here, especially like Lightbulb Sun era, or even earlier with like Signify. Like on Red Rose, where you get those slowly delivered, very lethargic Steven Wilson-esque vocal melodies, or the very 90s Porcupine Tree arpeggiated guitar, rubbery bass tone. Overall, it's a little bit like the last album. It's a very unassuming album, and it's not going to shock or shake your expectations, but it's so soothing, it's so pleasing that it just makes for really good company. Next up is another album I covered on that Best of Prog show with notes reviews. And it's one that just perfectly captures the tension between progressive and prog. It's not aesthetically capital P prog at all. Yet, if this isn't progressive, then I don't know what is. The first track, Celebrants, has this rhythmic displacement thing going on, and all this modulation and different keys, and it's just a technical feast, really all the album across. Nickel Creek came on the California bluegrass scene in the 1990s as child prodigies and brother and sister Sarah and Sean Watkins, and then this tall drink of water on mandolin, Chris Thile. And they put out a few records in the early aughts that just really defined my wife's upbringing and kind of musicality. They were just always on in the house. And this is like their second comeback album. They had one back in 2014 after what had been a 9-year wait, and then we get another 9-year wait for Celebrants in 2023. And they'd all been very active with their solo projects and other things and careers in general, but Nickel Creek is a pretty special thing. And like I said on that other show, bluegrass is a genre that really rewards rigidity and tradition and staying within the boundaries of the established way. And this just kicks it all down, you know. It is totally bonkers across the whole record. There's so many little harmonic nuggets and rhythmic nuggets and unexpected twists and turns all over the place. And while it stays true to the instrumentation, the palette of bluegrass or folk, it is so progressive, it's so weird, it's so out there. And it feels like the culmination of all of their interests and musical careers. You know, Chris Thiele's been hanging out with Jacob Collier. Like, how do you not hang out with that guy and expand your musical horizons? The last record I want to mention here is one that falls somewhere between psychedelic pop and folk rock. And it's an artist called Hollow Hand with Your Own Adventure. That's doomed to roll away from you. Chris Cohen mixed this album, and I hear his hand in this big time. You know, a song like Heaven Just Watched has got that very warm Chris Cohen kind of sound, with the kind of muddled bass sound and the guitar that just really takes over and stands out as the main instrument. So if you like albums like Overgrown Path or As If Apart as much as I do, then you'll get a lot out of this album. It reminds me a little bit of the easy listening of a band like the Fruit Bats. On first listen, it was a little bit too instantaneous, a little too breezy and toothless, but it's just grown on me a ton since then. I love the 60s Byrds influence with that twangy 12-string Rickenbacker type of guitar sound on songs like Weatherman or One Last Summer. It's just really beautiful, really uplifting music that's perfect for spring. Guitar is really the hero of this album, but the vocal melodies and harmonies are nice as well. And other comparisons that come to mind are like a band like Midlake, or like Beck's album Sea Change, or, you know, Morning Phase, that one that won a Grammy like 10 years ago. You know, not quite as sad and slow as those albums, but very much the same palette. And that's it. That's all the albums I want to recommend from the last month. It's really March focused. I think I'll put anything from early April in the next one. I'll put all the album names and artist names in the description below, along with a lot of other videos you can check out. And as always, thank you so much for watching.